God grabbed me. God's Spirit took me up and set me down in the middle of an open plain strewn with bones. He led me around, and among them, a lot of bones. There were bones all over the plain, dry bones bleached by the sun. He said to me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" I said, "Master God, only you know that." And this is where we find Ezekiel in Ezekiel chapter 37. And I think that sometimes in our life we have that same question, only it's not God asking, "Can these bones live?" But it's our very own hearts asking God, "How can there be any life left in me?" My name is Donna Woolham, and I am your host for Start Again on the Reinvent Your World podcast. And today we want to talk about this thought that we have sometimes about living life on the sidelines, but knowing that our purpose isn't dead, it's just waiting for breath to come again. You can feel so lost and invisible, irrelevant, unimportant, left out in the cold when life has created a place of trauma. Because for one thing, when we are in that kind of pain, we ourselves step back. We step back, and it's not about people abandoning us so much. It's about us removing ourselves from the life that we once lived. And sometimes it has to do with the relationships that were forged in a previous time and those shift and change. Maybe it's because of a divorce, and not only have you divided up the household and pets, but you've also divided up the friends. Or maybe you were in the job that you had studied and dreamed for all your life, and it's come to an end, and now you've moved on someplace else, or your position was eliminated, and so here you are without that same group of people around you. It could be because, like me with death, there's just a shift. Family that used to be really close, maybe they're not as close. I mean, that's not always true with everyone, but for me, it was. And so you find yourself on the sidelines, and you're wondering, how are you ever going to step back out again? It's kind of like fast-moving traffic, and you are at the entrance trying to get back on the road, but you can't gauge how fast the traffic is going. And you don't know whether to pull out or to wait, and maybe there's some people honking behind you, and you're just trying to figure out how to get back on the road. Or maybe it's like jump rope, when you're trying to jump in to where the rope is going, and you're not entirely sure if you're going to make it, and there's that little bit of fear. What if I trip? What if I fall in the car? What if I cause a wreck? What if I go too fast? What if I go too slow? We can really do some things to ourselves in our minds when we're trying to get back into life. When we're trying to identify ourselves again, who exactly am I now? And we can look around our life, and all we see are the dry, dead, dusty bones of what used to be. And we can wonder if there's any possibility for life. There are a couple of stories I'd like to share with you. One of the women you'll know, was everywhere, and that's Maya Angelou. I think it's interesting, her life story. She wrote the book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and that came out when she was 41. But part of her story is that when she was 7 years old, she was attacked and molested by a man who was dating her mother. She testified to that in trial, and a few days later, that man was found dead. She was convinced that her voice, her speaking up, had caused his death. And for years, she didn't talk to anyone except her brother. Her own life perceptions, what she believed about the circumstances around her life, caused her to put limitations and barriers on herself. And it took a great act of courage then to begin to live out of a place of healing instead of the place of being a victim of what had happened to her, from carrying that place of guilt because of those situations. Elisabeth Elliot has a different kind of story entirely. You might be familiar with her as a missionary whose husband, Jim, along with 4 other missionaries, were killed by the Auca men of Ecuador. The amazing thing about that story, and part of the testimony of her life, is instead of running away from that, she ended up going back into the jungles of Ecuador along with a family member of one of the other slain missionaries. They observed that tribe of people. They spent time getting to know more about them, and eventually a door was opened where they could minister to a woman who had run away from the tribal peoples, and they led her to Jesus. And over time, many of the people of that same tribe who had killed her husband and these other men became believers, and they changed their name to Warani peoples, which means people of the earth, people of the world, as a testimony to their identity of being part of the peoples of the world instead of just this Auca people of Ecuador, as a testimony of their faith in Jesus. She went back into a circumstance that she stood in the middle of that environment, and there is a question in all of us that says, could I be like Elisabeth Elliot? We all like to think we'd take the high road, that we would be able to think about a situation like Elisabeth Elliot's and say that we would do the glorious good thing. But I know for me, in the situation where my husband was, it was hard for me to get back out there and live life. And maybe it's the same thing for you as you're looking at how to start again. And maybe it has nothing to do with trauma from abuse or loss or neglect. It could be this thing where you gave your all into the work that you believed you were called to do, and it failed. And you stand there looking at the wreckage of what you thought was going to be your life dream, your life purpose, and you wonder, can these bones live? We have to take a chance again. And for some of us, it's starting again. It's standing up one more time and saying, I know that there's more to life than this. I will pick up my feet. I will crawl out of bed. I will open the email. I will make the phone call. I will try one more time. And then I will try again one more time. Because here's what happens when we continue to read the story in Ezekiel chapter 37. It's this incredible piece of this. God tells Ezekiel to prophesy over these bones. Dry bones, listen to the message of God. And I would say to you, sister, listen to the message of God for your life, because he didn't leave you in the middle of the road and leave you helpless and hopeless, no matter what it feels like in this particular moment. What is happening is that there is transformation taking place in situations that you can't even comprehend. Places where you don't even understand God is moving and working and shifting and creating something beautiful, and powerful, and new out of what looks like old and dead and dry and dusty. God the Master told the dry bones, watch this. I'm bringing the breath of life to you and you'll come to life. I'll attach sinews to you, put meat on your bones, cover you with skin and breathe life into you. You'll come alive and you'll realize that I am God. Ezekiel says, I prophesied just as I'd been commanded. As I prophesied, there was a sound and, rustling. The bones moved and came together, bone to bone. I kept watching. Sinews formed, then muscles on the bones, and skin stretched over them. but they had no breath in them. And you might be feeling that way about your life too. You've got all of the pieces in place. Everything looks like it should be working. Everything looks like it should be having life and should be flourishing and should be moving. But you yourself know there seems to be no breath of life or breath of God in what's around you. Part of our challenge is to ask ourselves, do we really believe what God said? And I would challenge you to speak God's word over your life every single day. Instead of answering doubt with more fear and worry, answer the doubt with what God says about you, with what God says about your life, with what God's truth says. Even if it seems hard, impossible to believe. I mean, can you imagine Ezekiel as he watched this, the absolute astonishment that he must have had as he saw this? But he said to them, God said to Ezekiel, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, tell the breath. God the Master says, come from the four winds, come, breath, breathe on these slain bodies, breathe life. So I prophesied just as he commanded me. The breath entered them and they came alive. They stood up on their feet, a huge army. Don't be satisfied to stand with just 1 foot forward. Press, sister, press until the life and the breath comes. Continue to believe the truth and the power of God to bring life to what feels so empty. Because if we're not careful, we will stay curled up in a corner. It won't be about people making us invisible or irrelevant. We will do that to ourselves. We carry embarrassment, we carry shame, we carry this feeling of no one will understand what I've been through, and we wear those as our garments into a world that, let's get real, most people are thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you or thinking about me, but we are so afraid of what people will think about us or what we've been through or any of a number of things, 1,000 things that run through our minds that will keep us stuck and afraid and hidden away. One of these things about these bones is they were right out there in the open. And sometimes we have to just open up our chest and say, God, you see me. You know what I'm like in here. God, breathe on me. Bring me back to life. Because if we don't, we can then begin to look at all of this emptiness and disconnection from the life we're meant to live as absolutely normal. And let's get real. We know that's not true, right? Disconnection is not what we're made for. We will become quieter and quieter and quieter until our voice disappears completely. We will believe the lie of the enemy until it becomes our own voice, and then we will silence ourselves entirely. We'll begin to believe that we don't have anything to offer, and our creativity is silenced. Our creativity is squashed down under loads of laundry, so to speak, and hidden away in boxes and crates, and we forget the beautiful creation we are. And we cover them all up with fear and then regret. And in the hot wind and the beating sun of fear, our dreams die up and we just try to survive. But we know that we are made for more than this. And we live in the shadows, tucked away from life, of what might possibly could have been. And we were never meant for that, sister. Lovely one, you were never meant to live in the shadows, on the sidelines, breathless and lifeless. Listen, I get it. I know it's hard. You have no idea how many times I walked through my house telling myself, pick up your feet and walk. Pick up your feet and walk. Donna, live. Donna, live. Donna, live. And there are still days here, 5 years later, after my Richard has gone to be with Jesus, that there are times when I have to remind myself that I was not meant for the shadows. I was not meant for quietly slipping away into oblivion, but I was meant to bring life and truth and hope to others. And wherever you are in your story, whether you are right in the middle of the turmoil and the chaos and the pain, whether you've stepped into a place of transition or maybe you're years past it, but it still is a garment that weighs on you like some sort of coat of arms. I'm here to tell you, you can live. I encourage you to grab out your Bible and read Ezekiel 37 or find it. I'm reading it today out of the Message translation. And if today's episode has been encouraging to you, I just pray that you will share this with a friend of yours, that you'll reach out to someone and let them know, hey sister, hey brother, you can move through this. You can live again. And one of the things that I do is I work with women who are in these kind of transition places, and I would love the opportunity to have a conversation with you. So if you think that you'd be curious about what it would be like for us to work together, then I encourage you to grab a complimentary coaching conversation. I call it the Belief Revolution. Grab that appointment on my website at donnawoolham.com and let's have a conversation. And remember, you were made to live. Listen to the message of God.